Welcome back to another episode of the Grief Observed podcast. I'm your host, Brad Morrell. And if you'd like to join me, you can find me on Facebook, TikTok, or Gmail, all under Grief Observed podcast. I've got a very special guest today, David Ferrugio. He lost his father in the World Trade Center attacks on September 11th. He was just 12 years old at the time, and he's here today to talk about his book, You're Not Dead Yet. So without further delay, David, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, man. It's always interesting when people introduce me like that, which is the way to introduce me. It's just even 25 years later, it still hits the emotional tickle bone every time I hear it.
Yeah, and it's I think it's wildly different too. You've got your own podcast, a very popular podcast, DeadTalks, and you've been doing that for 6 years roughly. And I think it's always different whenever you're on somebody else's podcast. It's got a different feel to it. It's like, okay, you told me before we started, you lead the dance and I'll jump right in. And it's different though when you've got a different lead partner, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think I love doing other people's podcasts. It's just nice to be on the other side. It's like when you're always driving everywhere, then it's nice to be in the passenger seat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many times and you take time to listen to other people's stories and to honor them for who they are and the people they've lost. But so often we get lost in the mix and we don't have time to speak about the losses that we've incurred. So why don't we take some time, maybe tell you a little bit more about yourself first?
Sure. Yeah. As you mentioned, my name is David Ferrugio. Got a vowel at the end, so American Italian heritage, if you will. I was born on Staten Island, raised in Jersey. My family's still out there. And, I moved to California in 2011 after going to school in Philly. I worked this summer as a bartender to make some money before doing what is the opposite of my mantra, which is leaving the people I love, which is a whole thing we can get into about how ironic that is. But been in California since 2011, had a million different jobs, everything but the corporate job. And weasel my way into starting Dead Talks, which just felt natural and felt like something that my intuition always spoke upon. And with the hopes of sharing other people's stories. Yeah, the big why is from my experience at 12 years old and some other things, but it was ultimately just to share other people's experiences around grief to help other people feel seen and see and express how universal of an experience death and loss really are.
Nice. Well, first I have to make a quick comment. You mentioned Philadelphia. Are you a Flyers fan?
Hell no. No.
Oh no.
No, 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 no. I got New York teams all the way down with plenty of stripes. It's funny because growing up, like when I used to play Madden and like the football games, I used to love the Eagles. And then when I have so many Philly like really close friends, and being exposed to them, I'm like, y'all are wild. Like I thought New York fans are crazy, but Philadelphia fans are another breed.
Yeah, I am a huge Flyers fan actually. So
My good friend, sorry to cut you off. My good friend, I followed the Flyers and rooted for the Flyers only because my friend got drafted by the Flyers in 2007. So he was a Flyer for a few years that I was there when they made the Stanley Cup. So I was rooting for the Flyers on behalf of him. But once he left, I'm like, all right, just see you later.
I understand. At least you like hockey. So
Yeah, yeah, hockey's great.
so you're out in California now.
LA, yep.
Okay. All right. Do you like it better on the West Coast?
Pros and cons, I'm a East Coast boy by blood. I'll always
Yeah.
prefer the East Coast for many reasons, but the weather out here is, I know that's cliche, but it is incredible. So that's really tough to leave.
Yeah, I've got a buddy of mine that lives out in the Coachella Valley and he's like, yeah, this it's wildly different than what people have always said. He grew up on the East Coast as well, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
Coachella is a different breed. I think I haven't been there, but I've driven through, and that's much different than LA, from my understanding.
Gotcha. Well, let's take a few moments to honor your father and introduce him to the listeners in case they're not familiar.
Yeah, my dad, David Francis Ferrugio. I'm David Ferrugio, so not technically a junior, but Brooklyn boy, raised in Bay Ridge, and where he met my mom, and he was someone who was just present, felt present in everything he did. I was blessed to have him just for 12 years, even though it sucks at the same time. Someone who always took the time when he could, when he wasn't working, to throw the ball around, teach me baseball, take me to games once in a while, show up for my little league baseball games. He lit up a room even though he never tried, always made people feel comfortable, which is something I always want to express about his personality. He was a silly dude, just like the rest of my family, a lot of laughing in our family, but he was someone who just was my male role model. And you can never replace the father figure, of course, but I was blessed to have a lot of father figures in my life that stepped up when he was taken away. But he was a hard worker, didn't finish college or really go to college, but worked his way up from the bottom to the top through charisma and hard work. And that's something I try to hopefully instill in myself. And even if I got a tenth of what he had, I'm good with that.
Yeah. So I'm sure that the events of 9/11 are wildly different in your view than myself. And we were talking before we punched record about how, I remember a lot of that day. There was so many things. And, I told you I could probably tell you what I had for lunch that day. It was just such I don't know, a wild day for the world, really. But I don't know that I've spoken with anybody that is affected firsthand like you have. Uh, Tell me a little bit about the day. I've read a little bit about, or read a little bit in your book so far. I've not read all of it, but so far I love it, and it really paints a different story than what I've had in my own mind, especially from the mind of a 12-year-old boy.
I appreciate that. Thanks for even taking a look. But I mean, you kind of said it. It's just weird, strange. It just feels so bizarre, especially 25 years later. It feels like a foggy, grainy old video type thing. And I mentioned pre-recording that that day feels split in two. It feels not even just a day split in two, but two different versions of me split in two because I remember that day pretty vividly before I saw the footage for the first time. And then after that, it was a completely different variation. But I was in seventh grade, Middletown, New Jersey, which lost, I believe, the most people that day outside of the New York jurisdiction, and a big commuter town. A lot of people worked in the city. Went to school. My buddy Jeff, who was late that day, a little after 9 o'clock, comes into first period. And that's the first wind I got of that something went down because he knew my dad worked in the building and told me that a plane flew into the building. And the sentence made no sense. Like, what do you mean a plane flew into the World Trade Center? I don't know what that means. And so I tried calling my family from the main office to try to get some information. They didn't allow me, and when I say didn't allow me, it's because they had like chickens with their heads cut off, running around, didn't know what to do with a school with a lot of people that had parents that worked in the city. So try to keep everything under wraps and allow family to call in and pull their kids out if they decided to. My family left me in school because I was safe right down the street. They didn't know what was going on, and what is the right decision there? I backed that decision because I think it potentially could have been even more traumatic if I was watching it on TV live and just uncertain, and then witness what happened inevitably. So I went the whole school day worried, nervous. I remember some boys were making fun of me for being nervous, but 12-year-old boys as they do. And eventually the bell rang where it was time to walk home, where it was leading up to my inevitable death and rebirth, if you will, because I remember walking back home with my best friend James, and specifically walking around one bend when I see my house for the first time. That's when I saw cars packing up the cul-de-sac, being aware that shit really went down. Otherwise, why the heck are there so many cars outside of my house on a Tuesday afternoon? I walk into the house, separated me and James, and I make my way to the living room to force myself to watch the TV. I believe, speaking of false memories that you mentioned, how my memory tells me it went down is they were trying to, keep me away from the TV. It's a little graphic for a 12-year-old, but I was going to see the TV no matter what anyone said. I see the footage for the first time, and mind you, this is a replay. It was all done. So while I was in school wondering what the heck was going on, my imagination was running parallel to a reality that already took place. The building was down, my dad was gone. I see the footage, and obviously at 12 years old, you're young, but you know what's going on. You're old enough to be aware of something like this. It's not fantasy anymore. And everything went black after I let out probably the deepest cry in my life. I just sobbed, and then it was like my body just shut down, system overload. This is the denial that's going to protect you in the moment, but everything that I'm blocking you out from right now is something that's been part of my journey, and unraveling and forgetting, remembering, and trying to understand where my feelings are during this grief process and what's coming from. But I don't remember the rest of the day. it just shot me down. And there's so much I don't remember. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot I had to ask my family about, and it was frustrating for a long time. But I now understand, speaking to so many people on my show and talking to my family, that my body had to do that. I was old enough to understand, but too young to comprehend something as tragic and graphic as this, let alone for any adult to grasp. So again, a lot of my journey has been growing into a man, even to today, and trying to comprehend and understand everything that transpired that day.
Yeah. Our bodies have a couple of ways of pushing away information. We can suppress it and push it away intentionally, but your body was doing it through repression, unintentionally, but almost like you stated, a protection.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of events in our lives that aren't fully clear whenever there's trauma involved. How did you go from there? Like, you've got sisters, right? Do you have any brothers or just all sisters?
No, I'm the baby boy and got two older sisters.
Okay. I was thinking I'd read that. Um, how did they see this event versus you? You lost the same person, but certainly relationship was different. What were their viewpoints versus yours at that moment? Any idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's of course better to hear from the horse's mouth, but
Sure,
we're
sure.
just different individual experiences, and that's the ironic part. Different relationships, different ages, different occurrences leading up to it, where we were. And my sister Jacqueline was home waiting for us. My sister Gina just started college, up north, and just different responses for sure. I mean, me and my middle sister are definitely more similar, and I think internalizing a little bit more. And my oldest
Mhm.
sister is way better at expressing and how she feels, which I feel like is more healthy than me repressing and internalizing. Um, but again, it's just so different, even just being the son, and it's so different being the daughter. You know what I mean? Because of the different relationships. So at the end of the day, we all rallied together, but even within the support and rallying together, everyone's in their own internal world. Nevertheless, even with all the support you can possibly have, it still feels like an individual me versus me type situation. So I think there were similarities in the internalization between me and my sister. She could correct me on that, but my oldest again would be more expressive, and how she would feel, as opposed to me being more observant and not vocalizing as much as probably would have been healthier at that time. But my family gave me the space to do that. They hoped I would express myself. They weren't forceful on it. They allowed me to handle it however I had to express it, but by giving me a safe space of not lack of judgment or anything of the sort. But again, we were kind of led by my mom. She was the sergeant, if you will. She made an effort to look after herself behind us, and we were her reason to keep going, as she's expressed to me on a one-on-one podcast that we did. And just different journeys, different perspectives in the same Calvary, if you will. And it is bizarre to see how everyone handles it so differently. But I was blessed to be with a family that, even despite our differences, we were still able to stick together, which is, difficult to do. It's difficult when everyone handles emotions so differently, and you don't understand why someone so close to you handles things differently. Why don't they see it like us? And I think that's where the takes a little bit of accountability. It's different. Like I said, 12 years old, I didn't know my ass from my elbow, so I'm not recognizing any of that at that time. But it is important to recognize how differently we handle situations, and to kind of take a step back when we can get offended or triggered why someone doesn't see it the same way as ourselves.
Yeah. So there's a lot of time between that event and certainly your Dead Talks podcast and even the book now. What did you learn in between all that before, or maybe what started the process of thinking of starting a podcast?
Yeah, I think I can't pinpoint an exact time. I just know it was a recognition of how little people discussed it, like at least outside of my family. Like, we were pretty vocal about things, I believe, and I just realized no one else talks about it. And when I say no one, obviously that's generalized. There are people out there, but I just thought it should be something to be more discussed based on my own experience of learning the importance of expression and storytelling, and getting out what's inside with my internalization. So it was kind of a reflection of my own journey of getting comfortable doing it, while recognizing the lack of discussion around it, the lack of sharing, as opposed to maybe culturally it's bottle it up and just tighten your boots and keep moving, when it's just not I don't find that to be the natural way of expressing this or navigating and managing and moving with grief. Also, with the idea that I felt guilty of the attention I got because people knew when my dad died, and this identity was thrusted upon me. I was known as the 9/11 boy that lost his father. And it made me again sonder the idea of other people and what they're going through and that don't get that attention. People close to me that lost someone and they're not getting those texts every year. Well, at that time we weren't getting text messages, I don't think, but nevertheless, I wanted to share other people's stories based on the importance of discussing it and also allowing other people to be seen outside of my experience where it was over the top and I got that attention. But yeah, so it's kind of a coupling of my own journey and what I realized was important and wanting to express other people's stories since that day. But it wasn't a heavy thought process until, maybe a couple years before I launched it, where I thought this could be something that is important. And it was just up to me to execute it in a way that I hope resonated with people.
Yeah, and I like the way you said, you're not taking anything away from anybody's grief. No matter how somebody loses a father, they've lost their father, right? And I'm sure that there are varying degrees of how we as humans view certain points or certain losses, whether we put a tragedy versus a long-term illness into a different category. You've talked to a lot of guests. Yeah, I think I saw close to 300 podcasts that you've done. Um, what's some of the common things that you see in loss?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, in regards to that titling or not titling, but the hierarchical aspect of how someone dies, for a while I feel like I was saying, death is a death, but it also it matters. There's so many layers to the experience of grief, as we aforementioned, but at the same time, the way someone dies does have a big impact on the grief experience and the impact in general. And it's not saying one's better or worse, but in my specific case, again, not putting it on a pedestal or anything, I can only really speak thoroughly on my own experience, but I can share other stories as I'll get to. The way it happened is insane. Like the way it happened is completely absurd and shocking and graphic and cultural, that it has an entirely different layer to the grief experience that has to be unraveled. So the way in which someone dies does have a big impact. And, it's not for better or for worse, but sometimes it can be for better or for worse. I've had people that are grateful that they knew their person was dying because at least they had an opportunity to in, grieve like in an anticipatory way and
Yeah.
had an opportunity to maybe say some things as opposed to the shocking. Then I have people say shocking is like ripping the band-aid off as opposed to seeing someone suffer. So who's to say what? But it does have an impact on the individual of how it occurs. But in regards to some themes, I think there's so many differences, but there are so many different themes. And I, besides the theme I just expressed about that, what that topic coming up, as cliche and simple as it sounds, I do see when people allow themselves to feel, that seems to be one of the initial doors to a progression of at least things improving in some capacity. I know getting better is something that triggers some people, but terrible example perhaps. When I broke my hand, it gets better. My hand's not the same, it's still a scar, but it's gotten better, but it still hurts, kind of thing. So I do believe in things can get better. It doesn't mean it's healed or you're moving on in any capacity, but at some point I've realized a lot of people that I've spoken to allowed themselves to feel. And what that means to me is truly sit in it, as opposed to, yeah, you could feel a certain way, whether it's shitty or this or that, but we tend to have our survival instinct where we keep moving forward and not really addressing it. I think once they said, I'm going to sit in it, I'm going to feel whatever this feels without putting a title on, I'm going to feel like shit, I'm going to feel sad, angry, guilt, whatever comes with it, and just literally sit in it without any forceful nature of pushing it aside or distracting ourselves. That seems to be a gateway of allowing all the emotions to come in. And then you might feel emotions a year, 2 years, 5 years later, they don't even recognize you were really suppressing. And I think once you let the air out of the balloon, there is a little bit of a relief factor. But during that expression of the air out of the balloon, it's uncomfortable and it sucks. And shit comes up that you didn't even know you were feeling or didn't address. And that was just one common theme that I feel like is the start of something more positive, or at least going in a certain trajectory. But that's not to say that it's a complete trending upward trajectory. It's an up and down. You zoom in, it's upward, sideways, backwards, it's forward, and then 3 steps backwards again. But at the same time, that awareness is a really important step. And I think that awareness is the step. You don't have to do anything about it, but once you're aware of what's going on in your head, the words and the way you're speaking to yourself every day, you could acknowledge it and not do anything. Just acknowledge it. And the next day, you start noticing these things that are going through your head and what you're feeling again. And once you start acknowledging it, then maybe we can start taking steps and actionable movements towards trying to work it out.
Yeah. I want to ask one more question, I guess, about the event itself, or the death of your father in this event, and then we'll kind of spring off of that into your book because I want to know more about your book. But as we're talking, I sit here and think if my father were to pass away, there may be a few witnesses to that. Your father, I mean, it's anybody breathing on 9/11/2001 witnessed at least a large portion of what was going on, and ultimately the death of your father and many others in that moment. How do you think that I mean, what do you think about that whenever you know that so many people truly witnessed firsthand this event that did ultimately take your dad's life?
I think it's important for me to respect the nature of the event. Obviously, I was hit, and many other people. I'm not a representative of that day. I'm one of many that experienced that day very personally, and let alone the people that were affected without losing someone directly, whether or yeah, they lost a friend, or they survived, or the people that got affected just from helping out and dealing with the health issues afterwards, or people that didn't go to work that day, or just people that saw it, and it's just traumatic as hell to see. So the whole point is this event is way bigger than my individual experience. It doesn't
Mm,
take light from me having my own grief. Like that sucks and that's real. But at the same time, it just is a global event. It affected millions of people. It changed the trajectory of the way the country operates logistically in so many ways. We can't even have the
sure.
old 90s sitcom experience of meeting someone at the gate of the airport potentially from that event. So it's just bigger than me. You know what I mean? It's way bigger than just my individual experience, but at the same time, my individual experience is my world, and so that is has an impact on me. But I don't let it. I haven't allowed it to feel like any anger towards people that
Mm,
personalized that day when I had a more personal experience. It's not for me to take that from anyone. It's not for me to even compare in any way, and vice versa. It's just we each have our own individual experiences, and some people are affected in their own way through the millions of variables in which they were affected on 9/11, like yourself. And I just realized that that day is even more of a ripple effect outside of just losing my father. And I think it's important for me to show the respect of that aspect of it.
yeah, it's interesting that I think everybody at the very least in the U.S., if not the world, had some form of grief that day, whether it's grieving the loss of safety that we thought we had, right? It's the world changed that day completely. David, I
Yeah.
want to take a little bit of a transition into your book, and certainly would love for you to take us through a little bit about the book. At what point did you first realize that, man, this story needs to be told, and not just on the podcast, but in form where people can read and see a little more detail that maybe you haven't shared on the podcast?
You know, honestly, this might be the worst marketing of a book of all time. I don't know if I don't know if I've ever felt, I don't know if I've ever felt like it needed to get out. Like I'm not trying to
Yeah.
put myself on a pedestal. Like my story is a must read because I'm just I just believe in the conversation, whether
Mm,
it's me or someone else on 9/11 or someone else with the grief story. I hope people share their experience because it's going to affect someone. And I'm not even saying I'm the greatest writer of all time. I just feel confident in my lessons, the gook, the shit that I did wrong, stuff that I still do wrong, my perspectives. And I hope that people understand that, again, I'm not a representative of grief either. I'm just one person like many others that have experienced grief. And I've been blessed to have spoken to so many people since the last 6 years that I've learned through them. So I've learned from my experience and also through other people's experiences. And coupled with that, I think people can learn from those experiences that I share in the book, including my own. And I'm not promising any answers, but I do hope that people consider sitting with the questions. I hope they consider reframing their own experience, learn something from me, disagree with me. It's not a prescription. And I try to include other stories that I've had on the podcast to make this book a little bit more universal. That I'm not saying it's my way or the highway or anything of the sort. I just want people to consider perspective. This is a book written about life inspired by grief. So I truly feel
Mm.
like that's why the title is "You're Not Dead Yet," because it implies life to be lived, and it's hard to feel that way when you're in the middle of it. It's hard to feel like that in general, but I truly have witnessed it outside of my own experience. I've had so many amazing people that have gone through on paper horrible things that I can't. I try to imagine, and to see them have certain perspectives of the positive that can come from it. Not to say that the positive is a worthy sacrifice of what was lost by any means necessary. I use the analogy in the book of the grief receipt. I would return everything I've lost, the lessons, the podcast, this book, anything to have my dad back and change that experience. But it's a no return policy. And so what we're left with is what is on that receipt. And what's on that receipt is some ugly stuff, but it's not to forget all the beauty that does come from it. I am grateful to have reframed the idea that I'm lucky to have my dad for 12 years. I'm aware that there are people that haven't had a dad that's still alive and don't have that. So who am I to not be grateful for what I had and to have a strong father figure in my life and to realize that I've had, yeah, the podcast came from this story. It wouldn't exist if I didn't have this grief at 12 years old, nor the book, but now I'm affecting people, I hope, in a positive way. I'm far from perfect. I'm not going to be able to please everybody, but it is changing lives, and not because of what I'm saying, because of the stories that I'm sharing. So anyone that's listening, I do implore you to, you might be shocked of how many people are going to resonate from your own personal experience, from the differences, from the similarities. And in this book, I just hope that people can just reframe things and say maybe to their own experience, say maybe to the words that I share, because it's not just grief, it's life, it's considering death contemplation and what comes after. And even in that aspect, like I have my own beliefs. I share it in the book about what may come after, but I also acknowledge the lack of belief. And maybe that's the case too, and how people find comfort in that. So I'm just trying to make it as universal as possible to apply to as many people as possible, yet understanding the individualistic experience that is death and that is life.
Yeah. What was the hardest part of this book for you to write?
Writing it. Like,
Period.
yeah, like, period. Like I'm
Okay.
an author by title now, but like I still, like, I don't know, I'm just a dude that just scribbled some words together and hopefully it made sense. I didn't write this book to get a notch under my belt. It happened naturally. I got introduced to someone. It sat on, like, the idea sat for a while, a year, and then it came back and I was like, this sounds right. I didn't shop the book idea around. I wasn't trying to get a better price. I felt good with the people that felt like they wanted to actually support me in the publishing house. They've been great, so I felt comfortable with them. The timing felt right. Like I feel like the nature in which I moved through this life is, yeah, logical and this, that, and the other. But another thing I write is this lack of control, and sometimes we forget to trust the inner voice. We forget this weird little thing we have of intuition that I think speaks volumes, and I try to trust that in everything I do. It doesn't always lead me down the right path, but I think it does, because even when it initially leads me down the wrong path, another door opens up and it turns out to be the right path. And it's just, you just don't know with some time passing where it's going to lead you. And this book happened in a natural, authentic way, and I wouldn't have done it any other way. If it didn't feel like that, I wouldn't have a book coming out. And it just, the timing worked out. Like I'm releasing it around the 25th anniversary, and yeah, that was a thought when I wrote it, but it delayed the process maybe by like a couple months. It would have came out, maybe it would have been out like today, which is a few weeks earlier, but it happened to work out where the timing made sense to release it around the 25th anniversary of my father's death. So that, like, these little winks from the universe, for anyone that may not be woo woo, whatever, it's like, that's just another wink that I feel like, okay, I think this timing made sense, and I hope that it comes off as authentic as I feel.
Yeah. So grief being a teacher, what are your thoughts on that? Because it sounds like you've learned a lot of life lessons through your own grief experience.
It's like that teacher that you had growing up that you could not stand, a pain in the ass teacher that for the longest time you're like, I couldn't stand Mrs. So and so or Mr. So and so. And then when you get older, you're like, oh God, yeah, she rubbed me the wrong way, but she was right. He was right. And that's kind of what it feels like. It's sometimes I don't think it's about seeking the lessons out. I think it's about allowing the lessons to reveal themselves and not even harping that there's going to be a lesson. I just truly believe the lessons will reveal themselves, but it's a revealing, and it's not a harping on. If you're in the middle of grief right now, it's like, what's the silver lining of this experience? My dad just died yesterday. What am I going to learn? No, it's going to suck, but it's taught me so much, it taught me everything. And it was a long ass journey, and I'm still learning. And I've said, as weird as this sounds, like, I don't know if my dad would have taught me as much as he has today if he was still alive.
Mm.
He was a great father too, but has taught me and would have taught me some amazing stuff. But the lesson that I learned from his death changed my entire lens of this world. It changed me to see people not just as people, but people that have had their own different realities thrusted upon them, and to be more gracious with people in the way they are and not so judgmental because I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what they were shaped as a child that has made them who they are today, and the nature versus nurture type shit. And it's changed my lens of compassion. It's changed my perspective on what this world really is and how to be graceful with myself, yet let alone graceful with other people, and to be present as much as possible, yet know that presence isn't perfection. Even just when I know that I'm not perfect with being present in the moment, I'm now aware of my distractions. And that all happened because of my dad being taken from me, and having to grow up a little faster, realizing, oh, my dad, my loved ones can die at a blink of an eye. I learned that at 12. I understood death at 12 and the way that it happened. So one of my greatest lessons was that this can be taken away in a blink of an eye. It could happen in that way. So who's to say anything can happen? But also on the flip side, who's to say anything great can't happen either? It doesn't have to be negative. Like, I was thrusted upon the negative in some capacity, but it made me question, like, okay, if this shit can crumble at a blink of an eye, then at a blink of an eye some beautiful shit can happen too. So I don't want people to forget the flip side of the coin. There's a heads and tails. They're both working off each other. You need heads and tails for the coin to exist, and it's a tough pill to swallow. I don't love the tactics of grief in the way that it teaches, but it's a real ass teacher, and I've witnessed it not only from my own experience, but from some incredible people that I've been blessed to share on the show.
Yeah, I felt like I had an awakening whenever I was about 15 years old. My parents went through a divorce, and it was a different awakening, and I had to grow up quickly. When I sit here and think of your story, like you stated, grief taught you life immediately at age 12, like you grew up overnight. Is there anything about childhood that you feel like, for lack of better terms, that you were robbed of, or you would like to have experienced differently, but with open eyes to the world and death, you were unable to do so?
Not so much as a child. I'm sure there's a laundry list of things I could sort out, but it's really just with grief in general, especially when someone dies at a young age, you're just robbed of a future. And I don't even like using the word robbed because, a lot of people tell me, no child should ever have to deal with the death of their father. And that word should is something I write about too. I don't even know what that means. What do you mean should? Just because we have the ability to live till 80 doesn't mean we're guaranteed that. I don't remember
That's right.
signing anything at birth telling me I'm supposed to have my father for the rest of my life. So it's a whole melting pot of conversation there philosophically. But nevertheless, the hardest part about my grief is almost today, where I don't get to share my accomplishments with my father. I don't get to ask him for his fatherly advice. I don't get to have a beer with him. I don't get to hear about who he was in regards to, like, not everyone's perfect. I'm sure he's got some shadows casted over him like we all do. I want to learn about that side of my dad. And now I get to hear it through stories, which is great. But there's so many future experiences that I'm never going to have that's left to my imagination because my father only knew me as a boy and I only knew my dad as a boy. So there's a whole future that I never got to experience. That is the hardest part of grasping today. And I'm at a good place now of a happy sadness where, yeah, it sucks. Nothing else to say beyond that. It just sucks. But now, what can I do with that? I can dwell in that, which, has some advantages, but you can't stay there too long. But I can use that to be present in what I have right in front of me, which I'm still have my mom who nearly died in 2023, which is a whole nother conversation. My nephews, my niece, my sisters, my friends, my relationships, this process of growing all that I want to do right now with the show. And I'm in the sweet spot where this is the fun part, even though it's the hard part. And ultimately it's just brought me back to this presence of being grateful of what's right in front of me, even amidst the muck of life that happens. Like, it's not always peaches and cream, but we can still learn to enjoy our life amongst difficulties, even if that's just for a brief moment. And again, this is all from the reflection of what was taken from me. And again, I don't even like the words taken from me. It's just
Sure, sure.
happening. It's part of life. And I got to look at it like a life gained as opposed to a life lost.
Yeah. You talked about the enjoyment of life, and I think of joy and happiness. And I certainly like to use humor in my counseling office. Life is tough. And what are your thoughts on humor and grief? One other thing I'll say is, I thought if I ever wrote a book on grief, it would be like the 100 dumbest things ever said at a funeral. That would be the book I would want to write. But there's a lot of humor in my thought process behind that. But what are your thoughts? Humor and grief.
I mean, I wrote a whole damn chapter about the importance of humor to me. Again, everything to me. And I'm not saying you have to be the best joke writer or a comedian. It's kind of coupled with the idea that it's okay to laugh. Me personally, I have a very dark sense of humor. It's taken a long time to get there. Perhaps I've always been that way, but I tend to make direct jokes towards it because I think humor is they don't say laughter is the best medicine for a reason. It's literally a biological healthy reaction. It's healthy for our body. It's a reprieve. That's why I love stand-up comedy because some people may get triggered, and I think triggers aren't necessarily a bad thing. I think they get a bad rap. Perhaps it's just a signal for you to massage things out. And again, I have to filter out certain things. I'm not saying crack a joke at the wrong time because that's not respectful. I'm talking about from my own experience and friends that I know we just handle things that way. But humor perhaps could be a defense mechanism. That's something I talk about too. We have to kind of be aware of that. Like, are you just deflecting, which is a real thing, or are you coping? Like I cope with it. It's my natural mechanism to feel better, and it's a diffusion of something dark. Because I see life as one big dark tragic comedy because it's so absurd. The absurdity of which life unfolds is insane. And I don't know what else to do, but sometimes not take myself too seriously. So, for my own experience, I will happily make a joke that may be distasteful to some, but I will read the room and not be disrespectful to someone else.
Sure.
But as I mentioned earlier, it's coupled with not necessarily making a joke about it, but allowing yourself to find laughter amongst it. So it doesn't have to be a direct joke or humor aspect in relation to the trauma, but while you're in something dark, it's still okay to laugh. It can be an indirect laughter in the middle of the experience or when it comes up. So I think it's more the permission to find joy and find laughter in the middle of it all, or even after in the wake of it, that really is healthy. And it's okay to feel a momentary glimpse of joy in the middle of it or during it, because it's so common and easy to be like, how can I be happy right now? And I've spoken to people who have had some of the horrid, most difficult experiences of grief. And to me, I'm not big on the hierarchy, but if I had to put something at the top, I can't think of anything worse than losing a child, and I can't speak on
Mhm.
that because I don't have a child who I've lost. I can only compare it to losing my nephew or niece, which feels like a child. But I've spoken to these people that have gone through that, and some of those people have that ability to still find joy during it, and the most gut wrenching experience that I could even think of. And that's why it's so important for me, yeah, to think about my own experience, but to listen to other people's stories that I can't relate to, but it sheds so much light on the human experience of what others have gone through. And you can learn from other people. But back to the humor, it is my savior, it is my salve, and it's something that will always be a part of me.
On the reverse side of that, I saw a comedian, I think his name's Jimmy Carr, the other day,
Oh yeah.
and he actually was reading the room differently. He saw a gentleman that was actually hurting and went serious on him. And I was just like, that was really awesome because he said something pretty profound. He said, the opposite of grief is forgetting, and you wouldn't want to forget that person. So you're always going to grieve. And I was just like, that was really cool of him, to be. I think it was in one of his shows, and he went serious. So there's a time and a place for grief. There's a time and a place for humor, and so I guess the main thing is read the room, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think I know the clip you're talking about, and that just shows a man that is a brilliant comedian, and that's what he does, understanding when and when not to say certain things. And again, that's very important for me too. Yeah, I think everyone has that inkling to know when or when not. And some people may say at the wrong time. It's just try to give them grace too, because they might just be nervous and not sure what to say and just reactionarily just said something wrong. And I don't get too, I don't, me personally, I don't know if I'm psychotic. I don't get too rubbed off by certain things people say because I think all humans are idiots, including myself. And we're
Sure.
all just trying to figure this shit out. But I understand when words can really, at the wrong time, can really hit someone hard. And we got to be respectful of that.
Yeah, going back to my perhaps future book of 100 dumbest things said at a funeral. What are some things, you don't have to be specific, I guess, but did people say things that were incredibly cruel whenever you lost your father?
I have something that I can't even remember who said it, but it's always been a memory that, again, who knows in my memory what shot or what's made up at this point, but it's happened. It's in my head where a lot of people, when I've shared it, think it's cruel, but I never thought it was cruel. So I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but at a young age, someone says to me, "You're the man of the house now."
Mm,
And I can see why people think that's very aggressive and a lot of pressure to add on a young boy, but I don't remember taking it that way, and I saw it as a challenge. I saw it as I am literally the man of the house in a boy's body. There is a level of responsibility innately there that I believe is important. I'm blessed to have beautiful, strong women in my life that took the weight of it off my shoulders for most of my life. And I have had opportunities to step up when I've had to since then. But I can see where that is like a heavy thing that I don't think I would say to a young boy that is going through it, but I understand where it's coming from. And it's kind of a tough love aspect at the same time, which I think is important in a certain moment as well. I think it's a battle of, or a balance of warrior and gentle, where it is important to be a warrior, be tough, get off your feet and take action. But there are moments where we got to be gentle with ourselves and around us. It's a perfect balance of strength and being gentle and offering grace. So I can see a moment like that. That's a big thing to say to a young boy. And I heard that firsthand. But to me, for whatever reason, I never took it as, maybe I couldn't grasp it at the time. Like, who knows, if I saw someone say that to my nephew, I'd be like, fucking relax. But at the same time, to this day, I took it as a challenge, and I took it as an onus of strength. And so something like that might be a little tough to say to a young boy in the middle of something like that, if I had to give you an example.
Yeah. How old are you now, David?
37.
37. So 37-year-old you goes back in time and sits beside 12-year-old you. What would you say to the 12-year-old version of you at that moment or in those early days?
Well, there's two things. Selfishly, for 37-year-old David, I would say it's funny. This advice is going to help me more than him, or it might help him too. I'd ask him to write things down. I'd ask him to, if you're not going to, if you don't feel comfortable expressing verbally, which I would hope that you feel comfortable around your mother and your sister, young David, but write it down, because not only is it going to be an expression of how you feel right now, you're going to thank your young self when you're older to remember and understand what you were feeling at that time. That might give you some pieces of the puzzle of how you're going to feel down the road. Because one thing with my forgetfulness that has been so frustrating and I've been hard on myself on, which I've reprieved myself from a little better these days, is that forgetfulness, wondering exactly how I felt and not having to ask my family what I was saying and was doing, as opposed to forgetting. So I think that'd be something I even tell family that may have a grieving child. Don't force them, but give them a pen and paper and say, "Hey, I'm never going to look at this. I'm not going to look at this. This is for you, but write this down, store it away." Just suggesting it might be helpful for you. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But I think that expression for a time capsule could be really helpful for adult David. And something more simple that I would say to him is, look at me now. Like, if you could see the 37-year-old David and see that I'm still here, I'm still standing, I'm still smiling, and tell him that I'm still here. So whatever you're feeling right now is not going to be your permanent today, because look how far you made it 25 years later. And it's not to say it's going to be easy. It's going to be up and down, but I want you to look at me and see yourself 25 years from now and know that you're still here and you're still breathing.
Hmm. I was on a call with one of my Navy buddies today, and we were talking about, I was talking about my high school years and how I still have notes and stuff that I passed back and forth with my cousin in high school. And I'm blessed to have that. But by the time my daughter went to school, everything was digital and, everything's so quickly deleted. When you're talking about journaling and retaining these things for the future, how much do you think the digital world does impact things like that in our grieving process?
I think it's huge. I mean, today's so different in how I notice people online grieving. Like, I'm not trying to dissect anything. Like, I'm going all Freudian on people, but I get, my algorithm is obviously focused on death and grief and loss and whatnot. But I see a lot of people. I've seen so many posts saying my so and so just died today, and they're
Mm,
sharing it with the world.
hmm
And maybe that's a form of expression. Maybe it's seeking attention because they want the support. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not going to diagnose it, but it's fascinating because, again, when we lost people back then, there wasn't really an outlet to tell people immediately. Like now, if you have a funeral, you can blast it out to social media for people who want to come. Then it was, you have to phone call or mail someone, or barely email someone to let them know it was happening. Now everything's more graphic and there's digital support. There's, like, if you don't have the direct support and comfortable with someone that you can express to in your family or friends, you just don't have the people around you in the positive light. Now you have other people sharing it in examples I just said to find that commonality, to realize you're not alone. Because I think the experience of grief can be isolating, even with the support. As I said to the top, it's an isolating individual experience. And sometimes it is nice to get perspectives and stories from people that are not close to you. And there is an outside view that can really offer benefits. So this digital age is offering way more exposure where I'm not sure if it's super healthy to see so much of it, but I also can see it can be really beneficial. And then we have all voicemails and text messages and images that I think can be hard at first, but it's nice to have down the line. Like I love saving voice notes and voice messages now because now I wish I had that with my dad. Now I have grainy VHS tapes that I can look at, but I know I have. It's nice to kind of look at the old text messages, and it can be hard to look at. I know people that don't want to look at that, but for me, I love those photos of my friend Veronica, which I don't have so many of that I can look at and just have floods back of memories and that we've had to each other because of the digital age. So there are a lot of advantages and there's a lot of disadvantages, but at the same time, if we use it correctly, I think it could be really powerful.
Yeah, I sit here and think about a skit by Sebastian Maniscalco talking about when people showed up at your house, many years ago. It was really welcoming, and now it's like, did you invite somebody over here? It's
Yeah.
wildly different. I think connection altogether is wildly different. And like you stated, back then we had to call people, we had to invite people. Uh, you know, make announcements in newspapers, whatever. Whereas now it's a simple text message. So maybe it's a give and take with connection. And like you stated, it's nice to have pictures and availability and things like that. But I also look back at those time periods. Everything was limited. If you had 12 rolls or 12 pictures on a roll of film, you made everyone count. You didn't take pictures of your food. It was you made everybody smile and you made sure everything was perfect before you took the picture. Now, where everything's unlimited and even minutes on a phone call, it's like, and here we are doing a Zoom call, across the US. It's everything is unlimited now. So maybe it's what do I value at this moment in my life? What do I value? How do I value that? And I think that's ultimately maybe what you're trying to get your readers to understand too is the value of life. Period. You're
Yeah.
stating you're not dead yet. Like keep living.
100%. Yeah. And I think coupled with that digital age, it's great that everyone can connect, but I personally don't want to forget that human to human interaction face to face. It is important to get out there. It is important to have that actual energy exchange face to face in person. Like there's people, some people that communicate online, and it's a different form of communication. There's things you'll say and type or text or post online that a lot of times you're not going to be saying face to face, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest. Often a bad thing, but I think it is beautiful that we are so interconnected. But at the same time, I just don't want me personally. I don't want to just sit behind a screen. Like I prefer my conversations face to face. I want to shake people's hands. I want to hug you. I want to have this proper natural interaction. Like this is amazing because it's way more convenient and easy, and this still
Sure.
works because we're talking as humans, but there's nothing like the real thing. And as we continue to move during this innovation of the technological age, it's important to get out there and experience the world face to face without these magnetic fields around us.
Yeah. David, I know we're closing in on time, but what are your final thoughts on grief, your podcast, or your books, or anything else that you want to speak about before we close out?
uh Grief sucks. The
Yeah,
pain's real, and whatever you're feeling is what you're supposed to be feeling. And again, I don't like that word supposed to, as I mentioned, but it's natural. And I know it's confusing because it's foreign territory. It feels like an attack on your body, but I just want people to feel grace for themselves. Don't give yourself such a hard time. And there's sometimes we got to give ourselves a hard time with that warrior mentality to get up and go. But I just hope people to realize that there's still life to be had. And for me personally, I know it can be convoluted depending on the relationship you have with the person. I just know my father, my friends, my family that I've lost would want me to suck the joy out of life. And I know if I go before my sisters, if I go before my mom, I'm going to haunt the shit out of them if they're sad for too long. Be sad. That sadness is going to be a part of your life, but don't stay there too long. And I want people to remember there's still life to be had. And it doesn't have to be today, it doesn't have to be tomorrow. I'm just asking you to say maybe. say maybe to yourself, maybe there's a day where I can feel like I can do that. And you don't have to force yourself. There's no timeline. And for lack of better words, as I already said, it sucks. It's hard, but it's a universal human experience that whether we signed up for it or not, there's another side. So keep some doors ajar. Try not to close them. You're doing the best you can. It's okay to take 2 steps back. That's just part of the journey. And not that time heals, but it depends what we do with that time. So there is a level of choices that we can make every single day. We didn't choose the grief, we didn't choose the experience, but there are choices involved in there that are important to consider. And if you can get inspired by other people's stories, I implore you to do that. And that's it. I hope you can check out my podcast. I hope you check out my book. And if you don't for either of those, there's plenty of other resources out there that may be more aligned, like your podcast or plenty of other that's out there. So there's a lot of support out there if it's not face to face. And I just want to send love to anyone that's listening.
Excellent. David, I'll leave you with one last question. Whenever you're gone, what do you want people to say about you?
Man, he was a pain in the ass, but he lived authentically.
Authentic.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, you know what I mean. I think the freest position to be in as a human is being yourself, and it's hard to be yourself in a world that's so judgmental. When people are putting themselves out there on social media, that seems like the most perfect experience or of themselves, and this is not the case. And I think I hope people feel like he took life by the balls and ran with it, but didn't leave anyone in his dust. You know what I mean? There's a good balance of doing what you want to do, doing what is feels right to you, but also being compassionate and not forgetting the people and the people that you come across. And I hope people see me as someone that squeezed the most out of this life. Not perfect, no one is. I'm never going to be. I am not right now, but that messiness is part of it. That messiness is part of being authentic.
Excellent. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks for what you do. And I appreciate the opportunity to share my story and what comes with it.
Thank you. Listeners, thanks for joining in. I'll have David's information in the show description, and we will catch you on the next episode. Have a great day, everyone.